Why do some people do this? How some researchers reduce trust in research. Hi, I'm David Wilkinson, the editor of the Oxford Review. I came across this last week, and it's both blatant and appalling because it really reduces people's trust in research. Now, you may have come across this concept here. It's called the learning pyramid. And basically what it's saying is it came out of a thing called the National Training Laboratories in the late 1980s. And basically what it's saying at the top of the pyramid, the smallest part, is saying that students retain about 5% of everything that's coming out of a lecture, about 10% from reading, about 20% from audiovisual or video. They retain about 30% from watching a demonstration. They retain about 50% from group discussions, about 70% from practicing something, and 90% right at the bottom of the pyramid, they retain about 90% from teaching others. And I say, you may have come across something like this before, and it's been around for a very, very long time. It doesn't mean that it's true, by the way, which we'll come on to in a minute. So, last week, I'm reading a research paper, and this is it, Developing Management Effectiveness, the nexus between teaching and coaching. And it was published in the International Journal of Management Education just last month. Now, the paper, which I was surprised about, actually references the learning pyramid. And it uses a reference here called Latrud, and it says adapted from Latrud. Now, the reason I was surprised about this was that, as far as I'm aware, this isn't true. And it's not true for a number of reasons. One is there are so many variables involved in learning. Things like, depending on your expertise, your prior knowledge, whether you've already got a framework of thinking about the subject, whether you're a good critical thinker or not. There's, reading can be every bit as effective as teaching somebody else. And in fact, teaching somebody else has actually been shown not to be as effective as some other things, again, depending on the circumstances. So I'm intrigued now as to why somebody would be using this, and also this reference of being adapted from Latrud. So let's just go on and see what the paper's saying about this. And it says, the complementary nexus between classroom-based management education and coaching is, however, and this is the important part, most strongly reinforced by studies conducted by the National Training Laboratory, or NTL, in Bethel, Maine, US, in the late 1980s. So, most strongly reinforced by studies, which is suggesting that there are some studies. The NTL studies, right, empirically reveal the notion of a learning pyramid. That suggests that there are some experiments. They've done experimentation, and that this is right based on those experiments. In that, learning is retained as at graduated stages of learning interventions. So, just like the pyramid saying that students tend to learn or retain less from attending a lecture or reading than they do from teaching this stuff. And they're using as a reference here of Latrud, that's a person's name, based on a paper that was published in 2012. So, just thinking about that, just remember what they've said. The NTL studies empirically reveal the notion of a learning pyramid. So when I go to the bottom of the paper and look at the reference, this is what I find. Latrud, a rebuttal of NTL's Institute's learning pyramid. Now I'm confused because that doesn't sound like, just from the title, like empirically revealed the notion of a learning pyramid, that it's evidence of it. It sounds like the opposite. So anyway, let's go and have a look at the paper and see, because titles could be anything. So I've got the paper out, and this is what it says. The article discusses the learning pyramid propagated by NTL. It presents and complements the historical methodological critique. And what that means is lots of other people have said this is not true, right? And there's lots of reason for it, against the learning pyramid, and calls for the NTL Institute to retract their model. Now, for researchers to actually put that on a paper means that there's very good evidence for saying that. It's a very unusual thing to do. Bearing in mind what they've said is the NTL studies empirically reveal the notion that this is saying the opposite. And they've used this as the reference for backing up the assertion that the learning pyramid is true, when blatantly it isn't. So let's just have a quick look at the conclusions of Latrud's paper. The NTL's Learning Institute lacks empirical evidence. the exact opposite of what that paper's saying. Any attempt to perform empirical tests of the model will encounter methodological problems. As I said, there's too many variables. Despite its inability to stand up to close examination, the model is still corroborated by the NTL Institute, and continued distribution of this model cannot be justified. And in order to reduce further dissemination, the NTL Institute ought to retract it. Can't get much less ambiguous than that. That's a pretty unambiguous statement, and yet the paper that we looked at is saying the study's empirical is, Latrud's saying the exact opposite of what they're saying Latrud is saying. And, you couldn't get any more blatant. There's no mistaking what Latrud's saying. There's no ambiguity in any of this. And what I'm confused about is this. Why do people do this? And I think there may be a couple of reasons, and my thoughts are, and these are the kinds of practices that I see in the review when we're reviewing papers, because we probably get rid of around about 40% because of either the evidence is lacking or it's poor studies or something. That's on a good day. On a bad day, it can be up to 80% of the research that we read. And I think there are a number of reasons why this occurs. I think the first reason is that people kind of make up a theory based on their intuition, and then what they try to do is they try to dress it up as research or retrofit evidence from other places. I think that a lot of it is just poor quality research. So you get people doing things like, they'll publish a study based on 10 people in my office, which is hardly representative, right? So we get a lot of that. Or the evidence is just inconvenient. And therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to manipulate it and present it as something that it isn't. And that's it's blatant and lying, basically, or just sheer laziness. And there's quite a lot of laziness goes on in, just about every aspect of work. Now, obviously, the basis of this is, if you're reading research, check the sources, because they may not be saying what you think they're saying. But what I'm interested in is, what do you think about this? What I'd like you to do is just pop what you think and feel about this kind of practice. And why do you think people are actually doing it? Why are researchers doing this? It's nuts. And it's pretty blatant and obvious. Anyway, I'm David Wilkinson, editor of the Oxford Review. And if you want to be the most well-informed person in the room, go to oxford-review.com and you can sign up for free research briefings and a whole load more. Okay? To become the most well-informed person in the room about people and organisations, including topics like leadership, management, organisational development, organisational change, human resource management, learning, organisational learning, learning and development, coaching, and work psychology and decision-making, go to oxford-review.com.